The officer taking notes was like a machine, typing dispassionately, recording my words without any sign of belief or doubt. "The witness identified you from a photo lineup," the first officer said, her tone flat. "A photo lineup? Based on a blurry image and a vague description?" It felt insane. "That's impossible," I insisted. "It wasn't me. They're mistaken." She simply nodded, making another note. "You'll have a chance to explain all this in court." Court. The word landed like a stone in my gut. They'd put me in a holding cell. Cold concrete, a metal bench, a pervasive smell of despair. Hours passed. Hours that felt like days. My mind was a frantic hamster wheel. How did this happen? Who was this witness? How could they think it was me? What about my alibi? The library records, the people at the animal shelter, surely they could confirm where I was. But in the cold reality of the cell, my network of normal life felt impossibly distant, fragile. Getting out on bail felt like only a temporary reprieve, like being allowed to stand on the edge of a cliff instead of being pushed over. The bail amount was relatively low, given the minor nature of the alleged crime, but paying it felt like an admission of guilt, even though I knew it was just part of the process. Calling my parents was agonizing. Explaining to my friends was worse. The shame wasn't about the crime itself, which I knew I hadn't committed, but about the accusation, the arrest, the fact that I was now in the system. I could hear the subtle shift in their voices, the unspoken question, "Are you sure it wasn't you?" Doubt, once planted, was an insidious weed. My first meeting with the defense attorney was a sobering dose of reality. Mr. Henderson was pragmatic, weary, clearly a man who had seen it all. He listened patiently as I recounted my story, showed him the blurry photo I'd glimpsed, explained my alibi. "It's not an airtight case against you," he conceded, looking over the initial police report. "But misidentification happens. And juries are unpredictable. The system is designed to process cases, Daniel. Not always to find absolute truth, but to move towards a resolution based on the evidence presented. Evidence presented by the state. Evidence that currently pointed, falsely, at me. So my innocence." I started. "Your innocence is what we have to prove," Henderson finished, his tone devoid of reassurance. "The burden is on you, to a degree, to create enough reasonable doubt to counter their accusation. It's going to be expensive. It's going to take time. And it's going to be stressful. Expensive, time-consuming, stressful. Understatement of the year. It felt like my life had been abruptly hijacked. Court dates appeared on my calendar like unwelcome appointments with destiny. Each one was a knot in my stomach. The first court appearance was a blur of official jargon, stern faces, and crowded waiting rooms filled with people who looked weary, worried, or resigned. I was just a name on a docket, a case number. The judge was a distant figure of authority, the prosecutor a sharp, efficient presence who saw me as a defendant, not a person. I was caught. Caught in the gears of a system that was designed to be fair, perhaps, but often felt indifferent. It didn't care that I was a librarian, a volunteer, a son, a friend. It cared about the accusation, the evidence, the process. My fight wasn't just about proving I didn't shoplift a few items. It was about proving my reality against the one the system had created for me. It was a quiet, terrifying battle for my name, my reputation, and the simple right to go back to my ordinary, predictable life. And I was just at the beginning. The court dates became a relentless drumbeat, marking time in my increasingly fractured life. Each appearance was a public humiliation, a chilling reminder of the accusation hanging over my head. I'd sit there, a stranger in a suit, watching the parade of cases, some familiar, some baffling, all processed with the same brisk, detached efficiency. My name, when called, felt foreign, heavy with a burden it didn't deserve. The strain was immediate and pervasive. At the library, the whispers started. I couldn't hear them, but I could feel them, like a cold draft behind me. Colleagues who had been friendly now averted their eyes or offered stiff, awkward pleasantries. My manager, while outwardly supportive, began to assign me tasks that kept me out of public view, away from the front desk. They said it was temporary to avoid customer discomfort. It felt like a demotion, a quiet sidelining. My job, which had been a source of quiet pride, now felt precarious, tainted. The simple rhythm of my workday, once a comfort, became a source of anxiety. Each book I shelved, each return I processed, felt like it was being judged not by its contents, but by the unspoken accusation attached to my name. My relationships suffered too. My parents, bless them, were unwavering in their belief, but their faces were etched with worry. Every conversation felt like a tightrope walk, trying to reassure them while battling my own internal terror. Friends were a different matter. Some pulled away, politely but firmly, their busy lives no longer aligning with my new, complicated one. Others tried to be supportive, but their sympathy often felt tinged with pity, or worse, that lingering hint of doubt. "Are you sure you weren't just in the wrong place at the wrong time?" one asked, trying to be helpful. It felt like a punch to the gut. The conversations were difficult, draining, leaving me feeling more isolated than ever. My girlfriend, Sarah, was my rock, but even our relationship was strained. We spent nights dissecting every detail, every legal maneuver, every worst-case scenario. The joy had drained out of our evenings, replaced by a tense, exhausting vigilance. She was fighting for me, and with me, but I could see the toll it was taking on her too, the sleepless nights, the dark circles under her eyes, the worry that shadowed her smile. The frustrating process of gathering alibi evidence was a constant, uphill battle. I needed to prove where I was on that specific Saturday afternoon months ago. I had told Mr. Henderson I was at the library until noon, then ran errands, then volunteered at the animal shelter. Simple. Except it wasn't. The library security footage from that far back? Purged. Standard procedure, Mr. Miller. We only keep it for 30 days. The volunteer log from the animal shelter? Handwritten, barely legible, and only confirmed I was there. Late afternoon. It didn't specify exact times. The ATM receipt from when I bought groceries? Generic. It proved I was at the supermarket, but not for how long, or when exactly. My own bank statements simply showed the transaction. There was no definitive, irrefutable timestamp proving my presence elsewhere at the exact time the alleged shoplifting occurred. "It's not enough to exclude you," Mr. Henderson explained, running a hand through his thinning hair. "It creates doubt, yes, but a skilled prosecutor can argue that you had time to commit the crime. We need something stronger." Stronger? How do you conjure stronger evidence from a mundane Saturday that was, until now, utterly insignificant? I started revisiting the store where the alleged crime occurred, not going inside, just observing the area. It was a small, nondescript convenience store, part of a strip mall. The security camera footage the police had was blurry, showing a figure with a similar build to mine, wearing a nondescript dark jacket. Millions of people fit that description. The witness description was even vaguer. Average height, dark hair, wearing a jacket. It was almost laughable, if my life wasn't hanging in the balance. I felt a strange, desperate drive to find the real culprit. If I could just find someone else, anyone, to point the finger at, this nightmare would end. I spent hours online, researching similar cases of misidentification, reading about the flaws in eyewitness testimony. I became obsessed with the idea that the witness was not lying, but simply mistaken, and that the system was too overwhelmed or too indifferent to care. I researched the store's layout, its security systems. Was there another camera? Could I find a clearer image somewhere else? It was a naive, amateurish investigation, but I couldn't stop. It was a desperate attempt to regain some control, some agency, in a situation where I had none. The emotional and psychological toll was immense. Sleep became a luxury I rarely afforded. My nights were filled with replays of the arrest, the cold cell, the judge's indifferent gaze. My appetite vanished. Food tasted like ash. I lost weight. The world outside my apartment felt threatening, full of people who might judge me, whisper about me, or worse, be the actual criminal walking free. I found myself flinching at sudden noises, avoiding eye contact, my posture slumping under an invisible weight. The fear of conviction was a constant, low-grade fever. Even if I didn't go to prison, the record, the shame, the very accusation would follow me, forever altering my predictable, ordinary life. I felt a deep, aching sense of injustice, an anger that simmered beneath the surface, barely contained. It was an anger at the system, at the indifference, at the ease with which a life could be dismantled by a simple, false accusation. "You look exhausted, Daniel," Sarah said one night, her voice soft with concern. She reached across the table and took my hand, her fingers cool against my clammy skin. "We're going to get through this. You're innocent." I nodded, trying to believe her. But the word innocent felt hollow. It didn't matter if I believed it, or if Sarah believed it. It only mattered if the system believed it. And the system was a vast, faceless machine that was designed to chew up and spit out cases, not listen to the desperate pleas of an ordinary man. Our luck, or rather, my misfortune, seemed to be cemented. The prosecutor, a young, ambitious woman named Ms. Chin, seemed particularly determined to secure a conviction. This was a small case, easily winnable for her, a stepping stone perhaps. She was unrelenting in court, twisting every inconsistency in my alibi, painting me as a evasive, possibly guilty, defendant. Mr. Henderson, though skilled, was playing defense against a system that had all the momentum. Then, 2 weeks before our next major hearing, when I was almost ready to resign myself to an unfair plea deal just to make it stop, the email came. It was from Mr. Henderson. The subject line was simply, "Call me ASAP. Good news. Good news." I hadn't heard those words in months. My heart lurched, a strange mix of hope and disbelief. I dialed his number immediately, my hand trembling. "Daniel? You saw my email?" Mr. Henderson's voice was different. There was an excitement I hadn't heard from him since our very first meeting. "Yes." "What is it?" "We got a break," he said, his voice still low, professional, but with an undeniable current of triumph. "A new witness. It's not direct, but it's significant. And they've provided security footage." My breath hitched. "From where?" "From a hardware store, about 10 blocks from the convenience store. Timed at 20 minutes after your alleged shoplifting. The person in the footage matches the description. But it's not you, Daniel. Not you at all. And the best part? The witness remembers seeing the person leaving the hardware store, then walking in the direction of the convenience store. He thinks the guy was trying to sell some tools he just shoplifted." I closed my eyes, a wave of overwhelming relief washing over me, so powerful it made me dizzy. A new witness. Security footage. Not me. Not me at all. It was a thin thread, but it was a thread of truth, and it finally offered a way out of the suffocating labyrinth the system had trapped me in. The quiet fight had just found its voice, and it wasn't going to be silent anymore. This was the turning point. Mr. Henderson was a different man after that phone call. The weary pragmatism was still there, but now it was laced with a sharp, almost predatory focus. He moved with renewed purpose, his briefcases seeming lighter, his steps quicker. The good news wasn't a magic wand, he cautioned, but it was the leverage we desperately needed. His strategy was clear: take the fight directly to the prosecutor, Ms. Chin. There was no need for a grand courtroom revelation yet. Henderson believed that if he presented the new evidence to her directly, in the controlled environment of a prosecutor's office, she would be forced to confront the possibility of misidentification and reconsider her case. It would save the state time and resources, and it would save me from the agonizing public spectacle of a full trial. The meeting was tense. Henderson, Sarah, and I sat across a polished table from Miss Chin and one of her colleagues. Henderson laid out the new pieces of the puzzle, a clearer still from the hardware store's security footage, showing a person with a similar build and general description to the original witness's account, but with distinct features that were clearly not mine. He then presented the statement from the hardware store owner, who remembered the individual trying to sell tools shortly after the alleged shoplifting. Ms. Chen's initial reaction was one of skeptical resistance. She pushed back, questioned the validity of the hardware store's footage, probed the witness's reliability. But Henderson was prepared. He had anticipated her every objection, countering with legal precedents, expert opinions on eyewitness fallibility, and a calm, meticulous breakdown of why this new evidence fundamentally undermined their shaky initial identification. As Henderson spoke, I watched Ms. Chen's face. The sharp, ambitious prosecutor I knew from court dates slowly began to crack. Her confidence wavered, replaced by a visible frustration, then a reluctant acknowledgement. The logic was undeniable. The new evidence didn't just create reasonable doubt, it actively pointed away from me and towards another, more plausible suspect. The original witness from the convenience store was brought in. Henderson presented the hardware store footage. The witness, a young woman who seemed genuinely distressed, visibly recoiled as she saw the image. She admitted, her voice trembling, that the new person looked more like the thief than I did. Her initial identification, she explained, had been made under stress, from a blurry image, and had been based purely on a general build and hair color. It wasn't malicious. It was human error, amplified by a system that was too quick to accept a vague identification and too slow to reconsider it. Days crawled by after that meeting. The legal process was still slow, deliberate. But the pressure was off. The constant dread had lifted. I still went to court, but this time, it was about formal dismissals, motions filed, paperwork processed. Then came the day. The final court date. Mr. Henderson stood before the judge. The prosecutor, Ms. Chen, looking considerably less confident than usual, stated for the record that due to the emergence of new, corroborating evidence, the state was moving to dismiss all charges against Daniel Miller. The words hung in the air, clear and final. Dismiss all charges. Case dismissed. The judge intoned, his voice surprisingly clear, almost kind, in that cavernous courtroom. Mr. Miller, you are free to go. Free. The word echoed in my ears, reverberating through every bone in my body. It felt like the air had been returned to my lungs after months of suffocation. Sarah was beside me, her hand gripping mine, her eyes bright with unshed tears of relief. Mr. Henderson gave me a curt, approving nod. Outside the courthouse, the sunlight fell blindingly bright. The world seemed vibrant again, every sound, every smell, sharper, more real. I was innocent. And the system, however grudgingly, had finally acknowledged it. The aftermath was complex. My library job was reinstated, but it never felt the same. The whispers eventually died down, replaced by a respectful distance. But the sense of belonging, of being just an ordinary, quiet part of the community, was fractured. I had seen the underside, the gears of the machine, and I couldn't unsee it. Some friends, those who had drifted away, tried to reconnect, awkward in their apologies. The genuine ones, like Sarah and my parents, held me closer. Sarah and I, in particular, had forged a bond stronger than I ever thought possible, built on shared fear and unwavering support. Our relationship had been tested by fire, and it had emerged resilient. The media picked up on the dismissal, of course. A few articles hailed my exoneration, highlighted the dangers of misidentification, and subtly praised my quiet perseverance. I was asked for interviews, offered opportunities to speak on panels about wrongful accusation. I accepted a few, speaking about the terrifying feeling of being stripped of your identity, of being a mere case number. It wasn't easy, I was still the quiet guy. But the experience had given me a voice, a quiet, insistent voice that felt compelled to share what I had learned. The scars remained. Sleepless nights sometimes returned, filled with the cold dread of being back in that cell. I still flinched at sudden police sirens. My trust in institutions, once implicit, was now a cautious, measured thing. I carried the knowledge of how easily a life could be derailed, how indifferent the system could be to the innocent caught in its grip. I didn't go back to full-time library work. The routine, once a comfort, now felt too restrictive. I decided to use my unique, unwanted expertise. I started volunteering for a local nonprofit that provided support to individuals facing similar false accusations, guiding them through the bewildering legal maze, offering the kind of understanding and practical advice I wished I'd had. It was a different kind of quiet work, but it felt profoundly important. I was still Daniel Miller, the ordinary guy, but I was also the quiet guy who had seen the monster and survived. My life had been stolen briefly. My innocence had been doubted, publicly. But I had fought back, not with shouting, but with quiet resolve and the dogged pursuit of truth. And in the end, the truth had set me free. The system was a machine, but even a machine could be forced to change direction if enough pressure was applied, if enough clear, undeniable truth was fed into its gears. I was innocent. And finally, the world knew it. My life was, for lack of a better word, predictable. I woke up at the same time, made coffee the same way, drove the same route to my job at the local library. I wasn't chasing thrills or breaking rules. I paid my bills, recycled, volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends. I was, I thought, a good citizen. An ordinary guy living an ordinary, perfectly fine life. The most exciting thing that usually happened to me was finding a long overdue book with a particularly obscure history. That ordinary life ended on a Tuesday afternoon, with the kind of sudden, brutal finality you only read about. I was walking home from the library, the familiar weight of my messenger bag on my shoulder, thinking about what to make for dinner. 2 police cars pulled up to the curb beside me, not with flashing lights or blaring sirens, but with a quiet, deliberate efficiency that was far more terrifying. 2 officers got out. One, a tall woman with an unreadable expression, addressed me. "Are you Daniel Miller?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady, though a flicker of confusion had already started. Had I jaywalked? Was there a problem with my car registration I'd forgotten about? "Daniel Miller," she repeated, her tone purely procedural. "We have a warrant for your arrest." My mind went blank. Arrest? Me? The animal shelter volunteer? The guy who alphabetized his spice rack? There must be some mistake, I stammered. The other officer, a younger man, was already moving towards me. "Sir, please place your hands behind your back." It was like a scene from a movie, one I was suddenly, horribly, starring in. Mistake. That was the only word in my head. A massive, unbelievable mistake. They read me my rights. My rights. My head swam. I tried to ask questions, but my voice seemed distant, ineffective. They were polite, not rough, but their politeness was part of the terror. It highlighted their complete lack of doubt, their certainty that I was the person they were looking for, that I had done something wrong. It wasn't a conversation, it was a procedure. I was being processed. At the station, the surreal quality intensified. The bright lights, the stale air, the smell of disinfectant and something metallic. My fingerprints. A mugshot, front and side, like a criminal. The feeling of being stripped of my identity, reduced to a series of numbers and procedures. They asked me questions about where I had been on a specific date, at a specific time. Shoplifting, they said. At a convenience store a few towns over. The evidence? A blurry security camera image and a witness who had given a vague description. Shoplifting? The idea was ludicrous. I barely carried cash. The store was nowhere near my usual route. But my denials, my bewildered explanations of my actual whereabouts that day, a quiet Saturday, I'd been at the library until noon, then ran errands, then volunteered, seemed to dissipate into the indifferent air of the interrogation room.